I really wanted to be an art student when I was a teenager. Hadn't had a thought about show business at all. It was only when I became an art student that I suddenly realised that there wasn't enough money for beer and paint. So we formed this band called the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band just to raise a bit of pocket money. We were mainly all art students, I think. That was the thing that held us in common. And the fact that we went from, just playing in pubs for pocket money to sort of touring the UK, we all saw the same things at the same time, the same embryonic one-way systems, the same kind of department stores in every town, and we realised that the homogenisation of Britain was taking place. And so we started sort of responding to that with, songs about trouser presses, which we found in the hotels, and shirt events. A lot of people don't realise the problems you have, laundry problems you have on the road, the glamorous world of show business. How do you get your shirts done? And there's that classical moment when we arrived in Manchester, I think it was, and we pulled up with the screeching of brakes outside a shop that said 59-minute cleaners. We took all our shirts in there and said, well, when will they be ready? This was a Monday. She said, about Thursday. And we said, well, look, the sign outside says 59-minute cleaners. And she said, that's just the name of the shop, love. So I think that, that's actually on one of the records somewhere. We were just doing what we thought was funny, what amused us. We weren't targeting any particular kind of audience or anything. We were just out there to have a bit of fun. And yes, we did have a hit record, which was a bit of a mistake. We didn't really want to play the singles games or be in the hit parade. As it was, we were going around the country earning as much as anybody who was in the hit parade, because our act on stage was so daft and Vivian Stanshall was so brilliant that people used to sort of tell other people, and people used to just come. So when the record company said, you should have a single out there, we didn't really know what to do. And so, but I mean, I'd written this song called Urban Spaceman, and Viv said it, when I played it to him, said too many verses. So I thought, yeah, you're right. So I cut 2 verses. We put that out as a single, but at the time we had a manager who was also our record producer, and he used to say after 3 hours, right, that's it, move on to the next track. But we used to say, well, we've got lots more ideas, we're art students and pretty stupid people anyway, complete strangers to work. So anyway, we got fed up with this, and Viv, I think, was down in the Speakeasy Club in London once, one night talking to Paul McCartney and moaning about this producer, and Paul said, well, I'll come and produce it. So that's the wonderful thing that happened to it. We were able to go back to our manager-producer and say, well, look, we don't want you to produce this single, which we didn't want to make. And he said, well, and who do you think you're going to get then? And so we said Paul McCartney, and well, I think quite a few people know this story, but Paul came along and produced it. It took 8.5 hours. And we then said, well, we don't want Paul McCartney's name on it, which sort of underlines the fact that the Bonzos did not take this business seriously at all. I mean, the poor manager-producer was probably nearly in tears, but Paul readily agreed to be called Apollo C. Vermouth.
Who came up with the name, by the way?
I think, actually, it was Joel Druckmann, who was our American bass player at the time. But I really do believe that thing about the 60s. If you can remember, you weren't really there.
Now that Rutland has unitary status again, a lot of people might like to see the return of Rutland Weekend Television.
Well, I mean, I don't blame them. I thought it was very courageous of the people of Rutland, even when they were taken over by Leicestershire, to sort of put their own signs up saying Rutland. So it was this spirit of defiance, which we kind of applauded in a way.
Graham Chapman had local links through Market Harborough, and which isn't a million miles away from Rutland. But just remind us where the idea for Rutland Weekend Television and subsequently the Rutles came from.
Well, it was because Rutland was the smallest county. Eric had this idea that around the same time as we put the idea forward for Rutland Weekend Television, everybody in the independent broadcasting world had to put in their franchise bids. And so they actually made a very cheap brochure thing, to sort of send into ITV for the franchise for Rutland Weekend. And we actually got an official letter back, saying, well, we thought, well, maybe this might be covered by Merseyside Tea Time or something. It was very tongue-in-cheek, and they had a kind of sense of humour about it. I'm glad it took place, because it gave me a chance to put pictures to music. Because when Eric Idle asked me to do it at first, I said, I'm not sure I like television, Eric. I remember Do Not Adjust Your Set, and the camera's never been pointing the right place. And this is not their fault. I have to stress it was the Bonzos' fault, because we never did the same thing twice. And arguably, you could say that Monty Python was influenced somewhat by the anarchy of the Bonzos. So I said I didn't really want to do it. And he said, well, why not? Because you can tell the camera where to point. And I thought, well, this is different if you can actually get to play with the toys of television. So I really cut my teeth on putting pictures to songs in Rutland Weekend Television, which then led on to the Guinness Book of Record.
Yeah, and of course, along the way, Dirk, Kevin, Stig and Nasty came along, initially as part of Rutland Weekend Television, I think, but then eventually they had a sort of tongue-in-cheek documentary special, didn't they? What did Paul McCartney and the Beatles think about that, by the way? Because you obviously you knew Paul in his capacity as producer of the first hit single, as you said. Was he happy with the Rutles? Did he enjoy it?
I don't think he did. And I've always felt...
And who cares?
No, I do, because Paul was a really good pal to us, and to me in particular, back in the old days there. And I thought, this isn't a very good way to repay a friendship and a kindly thing and whatever by putting this program out. I had no idea when it came out that he had an album called London Town. And of course, everyone where he went to promote this album, people were saying, what do you think of the Rutles? And of course, Eric wasn't particularly kind to him, but in the way he portrayed, Dirk McQuickley. But on the other hand, George was really, really up for it. Of all the Beatles, he wanted to put the suit in the cupboard and say, let's move on.